Hi, everybody. Welcome to an interview series that we have called Responding to a Crisis, Conversations of Change. The purpose of which is to create a sense of connection and support across a pretty diverse range of sectors who are all aiming to try and improve outcomes for the people that we work with and to support each other in a time of pretty intense change and pretty intense kind of shifts. I'd like to acknowledge that these conversations are occurring on Indigenous land and just pay respects to elders past, present and emerging in this space, particularly the role that they can play in, addressing some of what's happening. And today, super excited to introduce Elisa Buggy, the Executive Officer from Flatout, who I'm going to be having a conversation with today. I'll hand it over to Elisa to say a few words about herself and then we'll kick off with some questions.
Thanks, Naomi, and thanks for having me. This is so exciting, and particularly in this world of social isolation and social distancing, two concepts which we work really hard to try and break down every day. And what's really beautiful is that all sorts of innovative things like this one are popping up. So I'm really delighted to be here, and thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Okay. Well, the first question I had, it's a few parts to it, so I'm just going to ask it and you can answer it however you wish. But
sure.
What I'm really keen to know is, what are you currently doing for yourself, for your staff, for the people that you serve, and just for your organisation generally, to manage the current situation safely, humanely, and with a sense of dignity for everybody involved?
Yeah, I think that those 3 points are the key in all of this, actually, Naomi. The safety is obviously paramount, and the humanity in all of it is glaringly overt, and then the dignity in it. But there's also compassion, I think, that needs to be extended in these times. And one of the tricky things when you get, as I do, get about 25 to 30 emails a day at the moment, everybody has an opinion on either their response or their suggestions and recommendations on how to deal with something that is so unknown to us, so brand new. And one of the things that I notice is that you get so much information overload, and there is a source of truth, absolutely, but that source is a little bit vague and ambiguous at the moment in terms of what we absolutely know on the ground. And so people are reacting in a way that is that can be a little bit disruptive, not just to services, which is of course an inevitable outcome, and something that we're also experiencing, but disruptive to connection as well. And that's our core business, actually, in my view. So what we've done is to have a look at, I instead of putting a blanket statement out, of course we put in place the social distancing and the World Health Organization's hygiene recommendations and all of the sorts of things that we need to, as a responsible community organisation, put in place. I then wanted to ask the team, because I know that there are a lot of services that have made a really difficult decision to pull back on delivery of service. And our core business is, apart from connection, which is an underpinning foundation, is outreach and advocacy. And outreach is really difficult to do with women who've been criminalised, particularly when they don't have social media, or if they do, they don't have access to it constantly, like many of us. They also don't necessarily have a phone or a place of residence to be able to socially isolate. And so I got the team together, and with the luxury of a staffing group of less than 20, you can do that quite easily. I appreciate that that's not always possible for everybody, but because we have that luxury, we capitalised on it, and we asked the team. And I was so proud, humbled and impressed by their response, overwhelmingly wanting to find innovative ways to continue to support the women who are going to be and who are already increasingly bearing a very real brunt of the fallout of the impact of COVID-19. And so Yeah, so we asked, and we had a beautiful conversation, and many of the people that know me will know that I'm a practical, process-driven person most of the time. But I also don't mind my reflective practice, and so the conversation started with a temperature check on how people are going, and then evolved into a place of where do we want to be. And so from that, we've put in place our social distancing. Obviously, we're working from home, working remotely wherever possible, because I think that's our civil duty.
Yep.
And we're also putting in place things like Zoom meetings every morning and afternoon, using the Teams suite to be able to instant message and connect with each other and stay connected, and you know, the good old fashioned pick up the phone and talk to people, which has been awesome. Yeah. And then also, you know, working out innovative ways that we can still be there for our clients. And actually what we're finding is that the access points, for example, in housing, they're all done by phone at the moment. So you don't rock up in person to an access point, which has been enormously useful for the coordination and the liaison between our outreach worker and the client and the access point. And I imagine it's paying dividends, even if it's a brave new world for them as well. So
yeah,
just by applying innovation and compassion, I think we're muddling through, you know.
Amazing, thank you. And I love that that really beautiful reframe, and we can kind of come to that a bit later. That's another question, but around the unintended positive impact of this. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, you know, having to pick up the phone and have a conversation is not something that we tend to do. We prefer to send an email, but this situation has, even though it might have distanced us physically, I think in some respects it has brought us together more closely connected in terms of without, you know, the heart space, you know, we're actually connecting as humans.
Absolutely.
And I love what sounds like a huge amount of courage being displayed by your staff. I think that sounds fantastic. And this, you know, this idea of also visioning, you know, holding that vision about what you want to achieve and where you want to go with this. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah.
Pleasure.
So given that, you know, you're doing this really incredible work, I mean, most people are doing some pretty incredible work, but, you know,
they are
doing some really incredible work. It's super important in times like this that people feel they have a sense of agency and an ability to contribute to a certain situation, particularly if they've heard stories or seen things or had conversations that have left them feeling quite distressed or helpless. So this idea of providing people an opportunity to have agency and to take action, I feel is really important at this time.
Yeah.
So how can people support you? And by you, I mean personally or Flatout? You know, the types of things I was thinking in terms of advocacy, in terms of even just language to reduce stigma, shared resources, volunteering. You know, is there anything that you could put out to people as in some ways, a bit of a call to action to say, hey, if you want to help, we've got these things that you could do. Is there anything?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And thanks for the question, because as I say, we're a really small organization and we can take we would, you know, happily take all the help we can get. The best thing to do for us at the moment, well, actually, it's a kind of threefold. We're really lucky because we've got an advocacy branch to our organisation, and at the moment, we're working with a group of people across the country to put together a national letter to call for responsible and safe responsibility and safety for the people currently in prison at the moment, particularly the women that we're working with, obviously from Flatout's perspective, but for everybody. And there's been some extraordinary innovation across the world in places like Iran, like Turkey, the UK, Ireland, the US, and really quite enlightened and insightful responsible approaches to releasing people on sentences of less than 6 months, for example. So we've got an advocacy campaign running. One of the things that you can do to support that is to jump on our Facebook page and on our Twitter account at Flatout, and also Flatout Inc. For Facebook, and we put up there a lot as well our material aid needs, because of course many of the women we work with aren't able to get into a supermarket, and when they are, they're not always welcomed with open arms, and particularly in times of crisis. So we're gathering as much non-perishable goods as we can to be able to deliver care packs to those women that we work with who are fortunate to have a home. We'd be really grateful to anybody out there for suggestions on how to be innovative with accessing housing. Actually, at the moment, we've got some women who are street-based and who are finding that really tough, particularly at this time. And a lot of the services are doing their utmost to be able to keep their doors open, but of course the demand is exponentially increasing for them every day. And so so if anybody's got any innovative ideas, push them through as well. And otherwise, just to be kind, I think, is actually the biggest support, the biggest way that we can work through this time of emergency and crisis, as our politicians remind us. And I think that that's an important thing to remember, is that panic and fear can drive a lot of heightened emotion. And to remember that everybody's experiencing that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think certainly in conversations that I've had, people have suggested that not taking away from the devastation caused by the virus itself, but the panic and fear that has perpetuated as a result of that is just as harmful in many ways. So the idea of being kind is pretty simple, but hopefully we have the courage to be able to do that. And I'll pop some of those contact details that you spoke about. I was like writing something down over here when you were talking. I wasn't turning away.
That's okay.
I'll pop some of these details in the comments or in the description for our YouTube.
That'd be great. Thanks, Naomi.
And the final question, again, I do want to highlight this is not to take away from the devastation and the death and the harm and the illness that is being caused by COVID-19, but in terms of trying to create a sense of optimism and hope around this as well, I wondered whether you had a positive reframe for how, I mean, I think you've already spoken to some of that in terms of the innovation that you've seen and the kindness as well, but do you have a positive reframe for how this crisis may create opportunities for improving the condition and the circumstances for the people that you work for, but also the people, just generally the collective condition? Is there anything that you might want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I touched on it a little bit, and certainly from a pragmatic and an efficiency sense, we're all learning how to cope and adapt to technology and flexible positioning very quickly, which is amazing. That's a real positive. And you're right. There is extraordinary amounts of sadness in this space, not only for the people that are unwell or who are at risk of becoming very unwell, and for the people that have lost their lives and their loved ones, but also there's a sadness in the language that's being used, and the perpetuation, and of course working in an environment where we're trying to promote the strength and the inherent worthiness of the women that we work with, when language like social isolation and lockdown are bandied about so readily and kind of blithely for the general public, that has an enormous impact of meaning for the women that we work with, and also for the workers in this space as well. They really feel it. And what I've seen arising out of that is a banding together that I've rarely seen actually before. And so for me, that's an enormous positive. And as I said at the start, Naomi, things like this, innovative ways to be able to connect people, just wouldn't have happened necessarily. And in such a a thoughtful way, with such beautiful intention behind it. So there are you know, from adversity's hope springs eternal. I think I've just mashed two
It works for me. It works for me.
Yeah, but it kind of works for me too. So I'm used to it.
Hey, we're talking about innovation, right? Surely
Exactly.
to do that. That's a nice demonstration.
Exactly. I did it without Post-it notes as well. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, there you go. There you go. Look, I'm so grateful for your time and for your thoughts and for being involved in this little project. You have such an extraordinary job in terms of what you're doing at Flatout and the people that you're advocating for and working for. And yeah, I just think it's wonderful that you can still find time to do this and contribute and you know, to continue to evolve and find ways that you can support the people that you're working with. So thank you so much, and do it in such a humble way as well. Yeah, it's amazing.
Pleasure.
So thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.
And I'll put some details in there, as I said, on the bottom of the video. So hopefully you just get like an onslaught of people wanting to help. That'd be fantastic. But if not, you know, we're raising the profile anyway. So hopefully that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
amazing.
Great. Thanks so much, Naomi.
Thank you. Virtual high five. Here we go. Here we go.
I can't see my camera. There it is.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Naomi. Bye.